or can't do? Can you still get in trouble? Things like that. So we're going to be speaking today with my colleague, Attorney Christopher Maher, the criminal attorney here in Putnam County. So we're just... Morning, Chris. How are you?
Good morning, Michael. How are you?
I'm doing well, thanks.
Good.
So today we're going to be talking about something that a lot of New Yorkers are interested in, and that's legalized marijuana. What can you tell us about the new law?
The new law that was signed basically is going to further the decriminalization of marijuana that has taken place in stages over the last several years throughout the state of New York. It's important for people to remember that just because marijuana is in the process, and it is a process that we've watched under Governor Cuomo, that just because it's becoming decriminalized, it's happening in stages, and it doesn't mean that people can now do what many of my clients find themselves doing, which is driving around smoking marijuana in their car, things like that. That still is going to get you in trouble. Because if it doesn't get you in trouble for possessing the marijuana, it's potentially going to get you into serious trouble with respect to driving while impaired by marijuana, and you can be charged with that in New York. And I've had lots of clients who face those charges over the years, and they realized only too late that it's not your living room where you're sitting smoking marijuana in the privacy of your home. It's in a car that's subject to being stopped for any one of a number of reasons by law enforcement authorities for driving too fast or running through a red light or some other offense that gives them the opportunity to speak to you. And then they start to do the investigation that leads to someone being arrested.
So you talked about a lot of things there. You mentioned that this is like a process. What do you mean by that? Does that mean it's not 100% legal right now?
Well, it's the law that was signed in March indicates that marijuana is going to become fully legalized, so that at some point people are going to be able to buy it recreationally. And people are obviously familiar in New York now with the fact that we have dispensaries that sell it to patrons who have a medical marijuana card. People can go through the process of getting the card from a doctor or from one of the various websites that solicit you to get a card from them. But the fact is that there still are limits on what you can do when you have it, and you can't drive while you're smoking marijuana. You still cannot buy smokable marijuana in New York. And you can't go to other states and say, well, I have a medical marijuana card from New York. It allows me to drive around with it in my car. It allows me to smoke it when I want to, or to ingest it as I see fit.
That actually led right to my next question, because we live in an area that's within a stone's throw of New Jersey and Connecticut and New York or Massachusetts. And so what happens if somebody's driving from somewhere else that may not have it legal and they bring it back here? Can they still get pulled over for that?
You can't get pulled over for that. What you can get pulled over for is some violation that a police officer sees and uses it as a reason to stop you and to confront you. And very often, those who are familiar with marijuana know that there's an odor about smokable marijuana, that if someone smells you behind the wheel of a car with the odor of marijuana, very often it leads to you being asked to step out of the car, and you go through the same routine, if you will, that most people are familiar with drivers who have been consuming alcoholic beverages go through on the side of the road. And it's not good because the penalties currently for possessing marijuana are being lessened, and eventually they will be legalized. But it's like alcohol. It doesn't mean that you're free to do whatever you want when you're under the influence of alcohol. It doesn't mean that you're free to do whatever you want when you're under the influence of marijuana. And that's going to be a whole new it's going to be a whole new routine, if you will, once marijuana is fully legalized, which is going to happen gradually in the next 18 months or so. Even though the law was passed, the health department is going to have to set regulations, and we've yet to see how that's going to manifest itself.
Okay, so what it sounds like is what you're saying is that even though it's a new law, that they're still trying to figure out everything, like all the details. So clients shouldn't necessarily start using and thinking that it's completely legal, like a cigarette, right?
Correct. In the city of New York, and we are obviously just north of the city of New York, people tend to think, oh, you can go to the city of New York now and do whatever you want. And while the NYPD has been instructed not to arrest people for public consumption of marijuana, it remains to be seen how the law enforcement in the suburban areas is going to react to and handle those same situations. I have not yet had a situation where somebody's told me that they've been smoking marijuana in front of police officers, but it's going on in New York City. But it still doesn't mean that you can't get in trouble for it. And one of the ways that I've often told people that you can get in trouble for it and not even know it, people think, oh, I'll just I'll walk into court and I'll just plead guilty. It's just possession of marijuana. But possession of marijuana convictions, if you've been charged and if you're subsequently convicted of it, can have devastating effects on your ability to get things like student financial aid or to live in subsidized housing like Section 8 housing. In fact, they disqualify you totally from being able to do it. And marijuana, as antiquated as it may sound, is still deemed a dangerous drug under the federal criminal statutes. And so it's illegal technically to travel across state lines possessing marijuana. People say, well, do they really enforce that? You don't want to be the test case where they enforce it and you find out because you were driving to your buddy's house in New Jersey for a bachelor party and everybody was partying on the way to the party, so to speak, that this is still illegal to do it. And if the federal authorities get a hold of it, they can do punitive actions against you.
Oh, wow. So what about all those people that, might have had troubles in the past, that like a low level thing that they went in, they pled guilty, it's still on their record, but now like the law is changing. So what's happening there?
There's a simultaneous effort now in the legislature to deal with expungements. Expungement means that if you, let's say in the old days when it was even more frequent that it would occur that someone would walk into a court, they would not be accompanied by a lawyer, there would be no lawyer in court to represent the person, and they would just as they say, oh, I just pled guilty to marijuana possession, to pot possession. Expungement is the process where convictions for marijuana possession and some low-level sales are being deleted from the system. And that's important because people who have had that type of background, and it's many people, they don't know why they don't get the job. And if they don't get the job, it's because someone has done a background check and has found out that somebody has an old low-level marijuana possession conviction, and this person decides they don't want to hire them to operate a motor vehicle in the course of their employment. And they'll say to me, I don't know why I didn't get the job. I don't know why I didn't get the job. And the real reason is because that old marijuana conviction keeps popping up. And the prospective employer knows that he or she could potentially have an employee subjected to some type of an arrest for driving while impaired or something that's going to encumber their business. So expungement, some of the expungement that's going to happen and has started to happen since 2019 is expungements that are automatic. But I recommend to people that if you don't know whether your old marijuana possession case has been expunged or not, that the best way to find out is to contact the court where you had it, if you can even remember where it was. If you cannot, then you can contact the state and have the state tell you, but it's obviously a far more elaborate process, and it involves many more similarly situated applicants who are looking for information about my old pot conviction.
Right. So it sounds like even though on paper it's an automatic, that a lot of people, might fall through the cracks. So it's important for people to still follow up. Is that what you're saying?
It is what I'm saying, because you don't know if it's going to affect your ability to get student loan money, affect your ability to live in subsidized housing somewhere, or affect your ability to get a job even.
Wow. So if you do have concerns about expungement, or if you find yourself traveling across state lines, and you might get into trouble, what do you recommend people do in that matter?
Well, if you want to find out what happens to your old conviction, I've just elaborated on the process that's involved in that. The easiest way is to call an attorney and ask the attorney to handle it for you. The attorney will have an easier job of finding out, if they do criminal work, finding out where the conviction was and whether that conviction is still on your record.
All right. And what about in terms of people that might get, you were mentioning before that some people, you can still get caught if you're traveling across state lines, and you get pulled over and they find marijuana. What do you recommend they do?
I tell people, don't look at your car like it's your living room. Don't be driving around in your car smoking marijuana, because it's tough to get the smell of the marijuana out of your car if it's smokable marijuana. And that's oftentimes the type of substance that's going to get you in the most trouble, because when a police officer interacts with you after he or she has pulled you over, one of their senses is the sense of smell. And if they smell marijuana, the next question out of their mouth is going to be, have you been smoking marijuana? I tell people, if you're going to have marijuana with you when you're traveling, put it somewhere like in the trunk of your car, and don't use your car the same way you use your living room or your bedroom.
So it sounds like, even though there's all these new laws happening, that marijuana should be thought more of alcohol and not more like a cigarette. Or is that what you're saying?
Exactly. And as we wind up into full legalization of it, it's going to be treated like alcohol. And so now is the time when the State Department of Health is formulating regulations for how it's going to be sold and where it's going to be sold and how it's going to be packaged. And it's going to have to be remembered that there's going to be an age limit on how young or old people are before they are allowed to purchase it.
Makes sense. So it sounds like this is going to be a long process, and we're going to have to check in with you periodically to figure out what's going on.
And people are free to call me anytime, and I'll be happy to discuss any matter with them.
All right. Well, thanks for clearing all these things up. We'll definitely have more questions for you once the law gets cleared out.
Thank you, Mike.
All right. Thank you.